of you have told me that you've already read it. And it's by Dr., and I know I will not pronounce his name correctly, Atul Gawande. And he is a surgeon, writer, and public health researcher. And this is a very important book. I think it's probably not a book that's as easy to read. But if anyone is interested in purchasing the book before our next meeting, this is the book. You can get it on Amazon. I think this one is $10. And there is an accompanying workbook that I think looks very useful, and that is about $11. If you are not a frequent Amazon purchaser like myself, and you need some help, Martha Cole has said that she and I will be glad to help you and use our Prime account so you do not have shipping. So anyway, I just wanted to make you aware that anybody that wants to have a copy of this program for next month, as a reminder, there are going to be some in the back. So now Charlotte is going to tell you about our program today.
Well, good morning, everybody. Y'all thought you were going to get rid of me, didn't you? And have Sally instead. Welcome, Sally. I want to talk to you about two things. The first thing I wanted to mention is the meeting that we had with Chris Henderson yesterday. It was a wonderful meeting, a lot of people, a lot of you were there, and I'm wondering if you know how that all came about. In case you don't, we would like to inform you that your VaCCRA government relations pulled that off. Yeah, it was a lot of work that they did throughout the summer. Martha Copeland gave you a report on November the 15th, and she talked then about the Government Relations Committee was floating the idea of having an amendment that would require CEOs of CCRCs and management to meet regularly, a couple of times a year, with residents. She and Barbara Rose worked diligently, worked hard, met with the SCC, met with Delegate Willett and State Senator Van Valkenburg, met with Amy, and then met with Henderson. They were all very supportive of this measure. And that's how, along with Resident Council President Frank Miller, this is how this meeting came about yesterday. And I think we ought to give Government Relations Committee a hand. We got a promise of 2 more meetings and to have some board members come to meet with us, to talk with us, to see who we are. Great. Thank you, Barbara Rose. Thank you. Where is Barbara? Oh. Barbara's having breakfast. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Martha Cole. We appreciate it. Okay, now I would like for us to welcome Catherine Henderson, Bereavement Coordinator at Affinity Care of Virginia. She's no stranger to us. She has been our chaplain for how long? A year. She was a chaplain with us. She came to us in September and made a presentation. And we got so excited we invited her back. And she has been very helpful in helping us to plan this series of 3 programs dealing with planning for end of life. This is very important. She has an unending list of resources that she willingly shares with us. And on the back table, there is a stack of resources that you might want to pick up on. She generously shares ideas for programs, and we appreciate that, Catherine. We appreciate you. We hope we'll have time, well, I know we'll have time for questions from the floor. And even if we run overtime, Catherine is willing to stay and answer your questions. So let's give Catherine a hand and thank her for being with us.
Thank you so much, and thank you to Sally and the rest of the planning committee for inviting me. Good morning, everyone. I think a lot of you all know just what a pleasure and honor and privilege it is for me to be back here. So it's always, I'm just so happy to be here, and I miss y'all. I said that when I was here in September. I really do miss you. I do not miss the commute. My commute now is the same length of time as it took me to go from the gatehouse to the parking lot to actually a little bit less than to my desk. So I'm kind of princess-like now, and it is nice. But I am delighted to be here with you all today in my role as the bereavement coordinator with Affinity Care Virginia, which has a very confusing name. It gets mixed up a lot of times with the funeral home that is Affinity Funeral Services. We are not related at all. They're wonderful folks. I work with them a lot, but we do get mixed up a bunch. I work for a hospice and palliative care organization, and so in my role, I am providing bereavement support services to the family members and sometimes the patients who are on service with us, and also for the community at large, and that includes all of you all. And the same is true for our entire team who visits here at Cedar Field. So just so you know, a lot of folks don't realize that when a hospice is in a community, it means that we're here for everybody, not just the patient who is on service. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple of minutes, but just so you know, I am delighted to be here, and it's just such a privilege to see you all. Thank you everybody for coming out. This is awesome. So in September, we started literally the conversation about advanced care planning by talking about how do you get started talking about advanced care planning, because it's hard to even do that. And we talked about some of the reasons why and some of the ways to start into conversations about end-of-life planning. And so the planning committee, just in our conversations, thought it would be really helpful to have an overview of what actually is advanced care planning, what does it involve. And so these are mostly just to give you a couple of visuals. I'm mostly just going to talk to you all. But really, advanced care planning is a process that enables individuals to make decisions about what they would like their end of life to look like, to the extent that anyone can do that. And it involves several areas. I'm going to get to that in just a minute, but the thing about it that's really important is it's a process of discernment and reflection. It takes a lot of time and a lot of effort, and in every sense, both emotional and intellectual and educational. And so it's not something that happens super quickly usually. And I'm just curious, I would guess a lot of you all have done part of this, if not all of it. If any of you all have done all of the different pieces of this that I'm going to show you in just a minute, I'm just going to bow before you because it really is a lot. So here's the different pieces of this in getting started. It involves learning, which is what we started talking about in September, and reflecting and discussing, and then acting. And so we're going to really move into the acting piece of this at the February meeting, and I just say thank you so much to you all for deciding to show the Being Mortal Project documentary. It was a PBS Frontline special in, I believe, 2016 or 17. And so I think that's gonna be really a great opportunity to begin seeing what happens when you begin to take action around advanced care planning, because I know a lot of you all have probably read the book or seen the documentary, but it goes into a lot of the finer points of how do you make difficult decisions around healthcare. And I think a lot of times our focus with advanced care planning is around healthcare decision makings. That's, I would guess, what comes to mind for most people first, but there's really a lot more to it than that. And so I wanted to highlight a few of those things today. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the booklet this comes from. I know you're not going to be able to read this, but I'm going to give you the resource if you do want to go look through it. What it does is describe just the different elements of a process in a specific way. This in the next couple of slides, come from a document that was created by MD Anderson Cancer Center. Any of you all familiar with MD Anderson? So yeah, my cousin was a patient there for many years. They do wonderful work there, and this booklet, which is available online as a PDF to download, is exactly like their work. It does specifically refer to folks who have cancer, but it's applicable to across the board to anybody of any age, really. I think a lot of folks in their 20s, 30s, 40s wouldn't even consider doing end-of-life planning, but it's something that can really be done at any age. And I would advocate for it just because as a hospice staff person who works with the families of a lot of folks who have someone die young and suddenly, I know, that can happen as well. So just to stop for just a moment, because I'm looking at the words advanced care planning in front of me. I'm sure they're pretty big up there, yes. So I know not everybody loves planning. I have a master's degree in urban and environmental planning, and my first supervisor, who also has a master's degree in urban planning and a law degree, I think it's safe to say we are both planners by nature, just innately. He observed many years ago that there are two kinds of people in the world. There are the folks who close all the kitchen cabinets and drawers, and the folks who don't. And invariably they marry one another as a way to keep the balance of the universe in check. So a good friend of mine here says a similar sort of thing. For him, it's loading the dishwasher. If he loads the dishwasher, if you open it, it's going to look like the inner workings of a precision Swiss timepiece. And if his wife has loaded it, it's going to look like a crazed raccoon loaded it. So in terms of degree of comfort with planning and preferences, there is a wide range. And the nice thing about the advanced care planning process that's described in the MD Anderson booklet, a lot of other resources, and some of them are on the handout that's in the back of the room. but there's a lot out there. I just happen to like this because I think it's easy to follow, and it makes it clear there are all these different pieces. So depending on your comfort level with working through all of this, you can do it step by step. It doesn't have to all be at one time. And I think that's important, is to not give yourself a hard time if you hit a place where it's like, wow, just working through this is really, it's slow going, and it will be. I'm going to continue presenting things that are very kind of right brain. They seem very matter of fact and like, oh, we can work through this really concretely. And it's true, there are some things that are a very step-by-step process, but a lot of it has a very deep emotional undercurrent, and that also takes time. It's not just the factual planning pieces of it, it's the emotional component that is hard. And that's one reason why we're going to get to this in a second. There's a lot of support for you all in the process. And for those of you who have completed your advanced care plans, y'all can also be resources for everyone here, and I think we'll have maybe some opportunities for that in the future as well. So this is from the introduction of the MD Anderson booklet, and it just gives you just an overview of why you would want to enter into an advanced care planning process. Gives you the opportunity to think about things that are important to you, and that's one of the biggest reasons to do this. Even when you're not approaching end of life, it really gives you a chance to pause and reflect on your life and think about what you might want to do, or ways to do it, or people you want to have conversations with. As a longtime hospice chaplain, that was my experience, was that folks rarely were actually concerned about dying per se. They were concerned about a couple of things: being in pain and saying goodbye to their families and loved ones. And those two things are a huge part of the advanced care planning process. So the process gives you a chance to think through, reflect on, what do I want? How do I want to know that decisions will be made on my behalf if I'm not able to make them? It takes you through all the steps that you would want to go through in order to really have thought through those kinds of decisions. And we're going to see this in just a minute. There's really a lot of them to make. So there's the big categories are financial concerns and medical treatments, interventions that you might want or not want, legacy-related things, which is related to actually saying goodbye to family members, loved ones. What do you want to leave them to remember you by? And one reason why I really like the Anderson booklet is in the chapter on legacy making, it goes into a lot of great creative detail about ways to do that. I know at Cedarfield when I worked here, y'all were doing legacy making programs already, like memoir writing, and there was a series on life review essentially last year. So I would guess y'all are still doing those kinds of things, and that's wonderful. I think that piece of end-of-life care planning often goes sometimes by the wayside, because it takes more time, it takes emotional energy, and it's easier, I think, in some ways to say, oh, you know what, I can do that later. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples in a minute of why that can really make a difference. But the other big area is spirituality, and just what your wishes would be for a funeral, a celebration of life, a memorial service. burial or cremation, or some of the alternative and more innovative manners of what happens after you die. There's a lot out there that I didn't even know about that I've learned about in the past year as a bereavement coordinator. So there's another whole chapter on coping and support in this booklet, and it's so important to know that you don't have to do this by yourself. I'm gonna speak on behalf of the Cedarfield team, which I probably shouldn't do, but just knowing them, I know what a wonderful social work team y'all have, medical team, chaplain team, really the whole team here. And having spent a lot of time here, I can tell you, each of you sitting here, you are also a tremendous resource for one another. But I'm pretty sure that your team members, staff members, would be more than happy to help talk through a section of it, help figure out resources that are really appropriate for you. When it comes to the emotional side of things, the whole psychological, just beginning to unravel some of the things that maybe you thought, oh, I want to think about that, but haven't done before. Absolutely, the social workers and chaplains can really help with that. And here's where what I was talking about before, about the community piece of my work comes in. You can think of me as a resource person for yourselves. Our team would be happy to talk to you as well. We have chaplains, music therapists who are therapists, and social workers, as well as nurse practitioners. And so just know there's a lot of resources here, and through us, and I would guess other hospices, and of course local organizations too. That's another whole category that I'm not going to take the time to get into. I guess the main thing is you don't have to do this by yourself. It's a lot of work, and especially the appendices, which I don't know if you can see what that says. Maybe not, it's kind of tiny even from over here, but it basically takes you step by step the different kinds of medical treatments that you can choose to say, yes, I would want that, or no, I would not want that. I think most folks know the term DNR, the Do Not Resuscitate Order. And when I first started working in hospice in 2012, I thought that was the only advanced medical directive. It is not, by far. There are lots of them. And in the state of Massachusetts, which is where I started working, they have a comprehensive form, which is called a MOLST, which is medical, or I don't remember what everything stands for, but it is the comprehensive medical directives package that folks can opt to complete and have as part of their medical record. So here, that's probably a possibility in the state of Virginia as well. There's a lot of different options. The one thing that the MD Anderson document doesn't go into detail in the appendices, which does have forms, blank forms for medical directives, doesn't include the 5 wishes. And Laura Anderson had her copy of 5 wishes. We talked about that in a lot of detail in September, so I'm not going to go into it today. Any of you all completed 5 wishes? Okay, great. It is a legal document. Really, in all 50 states, there's a handful of states where they require an additional supporting piece of it for it to become legal, but essentially it is a form of advance directive that is legally binding, and so we may have a workshop on that at some point in the future too. You never know what's going to happen once you let me loose here, y'all. So the nice thing about doing all of that, again, is it begins to bring you to a place where you're contemplating things that have, are maybe kind of in the back of your mind, but never really surfaced. And Sharon and I were talking about this a minute ago. A lot of times families resist doing this because they feel like it's kind of depressing. And I've met a lot of folks who felt like it was bad luck to talk about end of life planning and wishes. And I feel like it is really kind of exactly the opposite of that for most folks. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples from real life. Several years ago, I had a patient, I don't think she'd mind me telling you, her name was Grace. She was in her 90s, and she had pancreatic cancer, which can be very painful. And so her biggest concern was her 3 grown children, very grown children. They were in their 60s and 70s. But you're once a parent, you're always a parent. And she was concerned about them and their well-being, and that she didn't want to die in pain. So her hospice nurse case manager and medical team, they were very good at working with her what her wishes were for medications at end of life. That is a whole category the MD Anderson guide goes into as well. And we're going to get into that probably some watching the Being Mortal Project documentary, because that actually is a piece of that whole part of decision making. But I won't spend a lot of time on it, but basically Grace's fears around being in pain as she was dying were alleviated by putting into place a plan with her hospice care team. But there was another piece of this. She was concerned about her children, and she really wanted their wishes to be recognized as part of her dying process. And so she was very open and had lots of open conversations with them. And turned out that when she was young and into early adulthood, the faith tradition that she had been raised in, she ended up leaving the church and didn't want anything to do with it as she was declining, and definitely not for a funeral. Like, she didn't want any rituals, she didn't want the prayers, she didn't want any of that. And as her children continued these conversations, they realized that their mom had really some residual regrets related to having left the church, and questions about, what was going to happen after she passed, and just practical matters. What about burial? What about funeral arrangements? So I'd gotten to know them pretty well by this time, so they called me and said, "Catherine, will you come facilitate a group meeting for all of us to talk through some of these things?" And I said, "Sure." So, as long as Grace is good with it, and she was. So we sat down, we had a really good conversation, and it got her starting to work through some of the things that had been troubling her, and to talk about arrangements. Then it started to get complicated, and I won't go into all the details, but it was around how her ashes, because she was going to be cremated, but how her ashes would be settled. So that became a longer conversation, and I could tell that she was getting tired. We had been talking for a while, and so I said, Grace, this is a lot of stuff we've been talking about. What if we just come back to it another day? Give you a little bit of time to think through it, to talk about it with the kids, and we can talk about it again later. And she was a very no-nonsense lady with a wicked sense of humor, and she looked straight at me and said, "Not too much later." And we all had a good laugh. We knew what she meant, but the reality was she died like 3 weeks later. She knew that she was declining, and she was fortunate in the sense that her children were not just willing but eager and open to having those kinds of conversations. And as a longtime hospice chaplain, I can tell you not everybody is. And I, just like with the degree of comfort in planning, I have all the respect in the world for folks wherever they are in their comfort level with having these kinds of conversations. So I know it's not always straightforward, it's really not. And even in the case of Grace and her children, they recognized even for them it could be potentially a little touchy, and that was why they asked me to come in and kind of help put the conversation into motion. So the interesting thing is about a week after the memorial service, which I officiated, and it was all what Grace had wanted. We all got together, her children and I got together, and just to kind of process everything that they had been through and talk through some of their grieving concerns already. And I still remember how it sounds strange. They miss their mom, don't get me wrong, but how happy they were. And they were really happy because they knew they had done exactly what she wanted in the way that she had wanted it. And they knew that they had had the opportunity to really be present to her and say goodbye to her. And really, I think the biggest thing for them was that Grace felt so relieved. She had such a sense of peace when she died. She knew they were going to be okay. She knew she didn't have to worry about them. And all of that made a huge difference to them after she passed. And that still stays with me all of these years later. I want to give you another example of a gentleman he was a retired engineer. And when he first came on service with us, he'd been sick for a few years, but then he was really declining. And so he was appropriate to come on to hospice service. And so went out to visit him. I was their chaplain. And he very proudly showed me his binder that he had been working on for a number of years with his advance directives. All of his financial plans had been made. Everything was in place in pretty much every area of these four key areas that I'm showing you. And it was beautiful. Talk about the Swiss engineering. Like there were tabs, like everything was very easy to find. And his wife and daughter wouldn't have to think twice about how to do estate plan, being the executor of his estate, anything like that. Like all of that was done. And he said, but I have to tell you, I have a couple of things I haven't done yet, and I'm gonna get them done. And they were legacy related projects that he wanted to complete for his grandchildren. And he did. One was just videos for his grandchildren for them to have as they got older. And excuse me, and in talking to his family after he passed, that meant everything to them. Just having his words, his story in his own voice was just huge for them, especially because he did have some young grandchildren who would not have remembered him really vividly. So I think, there are a lot of pieces to this that can be harder to do, but so worthwhile. I don't know anyone who's ever created a legacy kind of either document, video, work of art, booklet. There's all sorts of options, photographs, that hasn't been really pleased to have that. And so when y'all were doing that here last year, I was so excited because, and as Charlotte said, I do have a lot of resources for legacy planning things, as being a chaplain for a long time, but also as a bereavement support person. The flip side of the two stories that I just told you is what can happen when there isn't planning, and it's not to kind of scare you all at all, but just in the last couple of weeks, I've been trying to help a couple of families. One whom there was a will, but it wasn't signed. And there's multiple children. It's kind of a mess right now. So our social worker is working with the family too. And I'm a resource person. I can't actually do the work to really truly help them, but I am helping with resources for them. Another family, the gentleman who passed, he didn't have any heirs, so his niece is the executor of his estate, and he had done everything except for one thing. He had, had the disposition of his home, all the assets, all of that. So she would be able to just check, except for one thing. He had allowed a close friend to live in his home because the friend was elderly and didn't have anywhere else to go. And can you guess what I'm going to say? He didn't make any provision for his friend. So when his house is sold, this gentleman who was living there, he's not going to have anywhere to live. So it's things like that really can be hard on folks. And just thinking about, I mentioned this in September too, and it seemed like it hit a chord with a bunch of folks, is as a grief support person, I would say a large percentage of what I'm talking to folks about from things that they're concerned about are their regrets. And they are usually in the realm of, did I do everything for my mom? Was this what she wanted? Would she have wanted this instead? Wow, it was a beautiful funeral, but I wonder, did she have a favorite hymn? Did she have scripture that she would have wanted read? So that whole big category of regrets, it encompasses a lot, and it's often very, it gets really embedded in folks. There's a young woman who I've been doing support visits with weekly for a few months now, and it's hard for her to work through her regrets about the conversations that she didn't have with her mom. She just keeps revisiting the things that she could have done but didn't do. And one of the things that she says that is extremely common, and that is that when her mom got really, really sick, acutely ill, she feels like she didn't function very well. And that is a very real concern. When someone is really ill, it can be very chaotic. At a minimum, it's extremely stressful, and we all know that we are not at our highest functioning ability when we are really stressed. A big part of my job as a hospice chaplain was actually providing stress management care for caregivers because it's so hard. And the same thing happens when somebody's really sick, and it's even a lot of times in the work that I do, a medical emergency situation. It's really hard to be making decisions at all, but it's hard to feel like you're really present. And so that's one of the things that this young woman I just mentioned and I have talked about, is just being able to forgive herself for that, because no one is able to be, the Swiss engineering expert in those moments. There's just too much going on. But it's hard to work through that. So it's, to the extent that folks know that they have figured things out in advance, it really can make a difference. And I go back to Grace's family and just their sense that they had completed their journey with her. They really had the sense of that because of the conversations they had had with her. It was a true gift for all of them. It was a gift for Grace, It was a gift that she gave them, and it was a gift that they gave her. So I love that and hope that that can be shared with other folks as well. It's not always super straightforward. Again, I told you it was gonna sound very right brain, like this is, oh, we can all do it. And we can do parts of it. It's not always gonna be the way I've just outlined it. But just know that there's a lot of support here for y'all if you wanna enter into any part of this process. So I'm looking forward to seeing you all in February as well. And let's take some questions if y'all, I think Sally's gonna be the moderator here.
Testing. Testing.
Yeah.
We're down to one crippled mic. They've ordered some new ones. May I ask you a question about how you feel about MAID that is all over Canada, which stands for Medical Assistance in Dying? And there are over 14 or 15 states that have it, but Virginia so far has not passed it. How do you feel about that?
So that's really kind of out of my scope of practice, honestly. I'm not a medical ethics kind of person. And as a chaplain, I never had to encounter that, except one time. It was actually the daughter of a patient who had advanced breast cancer, and she opted for that. I believe she went to Colorado to die. So I have a pretty complicated point of view, but it's my own personal point of view. It's not as a professional at all. So you know what, I don't want to sidestep that, but it's hard for me because as a chaplain accompanying people as they are dying, this is going to sound absolutely crazy, I know, but I believe that there is actual value in the dying process to the soul of the person who is dying. Again, this is purely Catherine Henderson as citizen Catherine Henderson speaking. I have witnessed it a lot. I feel like people are working things out as they are dying. And so from my standpoint, that's what concerns me about assisted ending of life is I just don't know what happens, so I'm probably not a good person to give you an answer about that, but to me, I don't think it's a slam dunk answer. I'll just put it that way. I don't think there's a cut and dried answer. Sorry, that might not be what you were wanting to hear.
Okay, another question here.
I just wanted to add some information just about Virginia. There were bills in the legislature last year about them. The sponsors of the bill have decided not to introduce it in the short session this year because the governor has said he would veto it. So they're planning to do it next year. Representative Patrick Hope from Arlington and Gazilla Hazami in the Senate are sponsors of the bills.
Thank you.
And I have one question. Well, in the back of the room is the advanced care planning resources, and I was particularly interested in information about MD Anderson, how to get the booklet. If there are not enough copies, for everybody in the room, just let me know and I'll give them to you.
Yeah, I only brought 50.
Yeah.
So
Well, we did, this is
this is
91
awesome.
people.
Y'all.
Yes, this
Give
is
me
our
something
best
to-
ever.
Yeah, this is awesome.
And I did want to say and ask a question of Charlotte. Aren't we doing in the third month, which is March, part of this trilogy that so it has a connection, the 5 wishes? Okay, so we'll be having 5 wishes in March.
In depth, like that'll be, there's a lot there. And Sally, I'm so glad you said that, because anyone who, Charlotte has, and Sally have my email address. If there isn't a handout back there left over, if y'all would like the live links, just email me and I'll email you the document so you can just click on the link. With the MD Anderson booklet, if you search for that, if you do a Google search for it, sometimes it will come right up and sometimes it doesn't. So if you would like the live link for it so you're not typing in code that goes, like this, just email me and I'll send it to you. But thanks for saying that, Sally. Yes.
Okay, true confession. I haven't told my husband that he's in hospice care. And I had a friend who, the day before her husband died, she says, I'm not going to tell him he's under hospice care because he'll die. And so I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, and I don't know how to bring up the topic of, hey honey, did you know you're going to die one of these days? And he's not got much brain left, but he may know what I'm saying. So I just don't know what to do, and I'll welcome your advice.
Thanks for that softball question, Nancy. Wow, y'all are playing hardball this morning. I'm impressed. So yeah, that happens a lot. That is not uncommon that family members are hesitant to say the word hospice. And part of it, and I'm really not trying to sidestep your question, but part of it is the connotation of hospice still, even after 35 years of a federal hospice program, is that someone goes on hospice right before they die. And that is not the intention of the federal hospice program. The intention is for it to provide medical care in a supportive manner so that people die peacefully, as comfortably as is possible. And that often means having support for several months. I've had hospice patients who were on service for years. And so but the perception, the public perception, is that if you say the word hospice, it is essentially its own death sentence. And so there is a lot around that for most folks still. So one thing is, if you all had that conversation before he got sick, then you would say, well, yeah, I know that Tom actually wants to know that. But who thinks to talk about that when they're in their 40s, 50s? Like most of us don't think to do that. I would now, but I wouldn't have when I was in my 40s. So, I think you go with your gut instinct. I really truly do. I think it's whatever feels right to you. You know him best, and you have a sense of what's the right thing to say, not to say, and that's okay. And the hospice team, we always introduce ourselves as the support team. We rarely come in saying, hi, we are your hospice nurse and we're here to medicate you. It's very much here is the team that's going to be additional support. A lot of times in a community like Cedarfield, we are basically another layer of support in addition to the team that's in place here. So it's we're working with everybody and very respectful of the folks in the program itself, as well as our patient and their family members. So, and it's so, you just never know. Like sometimes patients will say, and this is a real thing, kind of goes back to my earlier comment. Often people do know, like Grace did, that they are dying, that they're in an actively transitioning, really declining kind of sense. And they don't always articulate it, but often they do. And they will, so you're giving me an opportunity, Nancy, to like preach just a little bit, that when folks do say, you know what, I know I'm not doing very well and I want to talk about it, to be able to say, okay, I can listen to that. That's a hard thing to hear. It really is. But I've had a lot of patients through the years who did say that to me or say it to a family member with me there and be able to talk about it. And the nice thing about that is for the folks who are able to do the cognitive piece of it, it does give them a chance to say goodbye. One of the things that I think a lot of times we don't think about as often is that the person who is dying is saying goodbye, just as the loved ones are saying goodbye as well. And so having that opportunity like Grace and her children did to really truly say goodbye, it made a difference. But Grace was completely, I mean, I told you what she said when I said we can talk about it later. She was like, yeah, looking at my watch. So, you know, she was completely sharp as a tack. So it is different when there is some cognitive impairment of some sort. Often folks, and you know, I'm speaking very broadly dementia-related sorts of things. Often folks feel the emotion of whatever is going on related to grieving and loss and those kinds of things, but they're not able to process it. They're not able to articulate what they're feeling, and that can cause, you know, some suffering, and that's hard to witness too. So all of which I'm going back to, there's not a standard answer for that, but I trust your instinct. I always respect the family members and their sense of what will be the most beneficial thing to do for a family member. I really do, including you.
Any other questions?
I'd just like to know, is this presentation on any of the Cedar Field apps that we can revisit it ourselves, or is this a done deal?
Is Delonte back there filming?
It'll be loaded to YouTube once I upload it. Kate will load it to the channel once I load it to YouTube.
Wow, fancy, y'all.
So it'll be on YouTube? Yeah, can you tell us what you
Yes,
said?
Delonte said that once it's processed, it will be uploaded to YouTube.
Thank
The
you.
Cedar Field YouTube. Is it Cedar Field or Pinnacle Living?
Like Cedar Field Community, I
Okay.
believe.
Cedar Field, yeah. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that question. I did not know that. That's awesome.
More questions? I do want to say how this came about somewhat when Charlotte and the team who put together the lectures said, you know, what will we do this year? Charlotte particularly, and me to some extent, had been asked by people or their concerns expressed that they're afraid of having no family, or having family that can't get here, or whatever. And they just feel like they're not gonna be cared for. And so the trilogy of lectures we're having will address what you can do yourself. Because I do think that you'll have control if you pre-plan. And it'll make you a lot more comfortable about the end of life. And also more comfortable about what Cedarfield has in place for you. And that's why we're being supported by the administration, and why we have speakers from the administration who will be coming in to assist us. And then lastly, a whole bunch of people have been responsible for organizing the lectures, but no one like Charlotte. And she thought she was off the hook. She was president, and I said, well, I'm not gonna do it and have to do all these lectures. So the next thing she knows, we know she's working harder than she ever has. She's not even president.
If you don't mind, I just want to add one more thing about what I was saying about medical aid and dying that I forgot about. In a recent VaCCRA newsletter, well, the Government Relations Committee really had not taken a position on this issue because it's quite controversial. But in a recent VaCCRA newsletter, we had articles, one pro and one con, and I'll pass that on noted, so maybe you could be part of this program in the future.
Yeah, if I could piggyback on that just a little bit, how many of y'all have watched the Being Mortal documentary or read the book? It's a bunch of y'all. So you know, I mean, the heart and soul of it is, how do you make these kinds of decisions? And what do you want? You know, like really and truly, what do you envision? And they are very hard decisions to make. One of the reasons why I like this documentary so much is you really get a sense of the doctors who are the medical professionals who are helping folks who are very sick decide, should I stop chemo? You know, should I just enjoy, you know, the next year of my life, or should I keep pushing? Should I keep going? And I have lost count of literally hundreds and hundreds of families that I've accompanied who have had to make that decision. It's tough. It's really, really hard. And so I think that the program in February will be great to give you at least a sense of it is really hard. I think sometimes we live in such a can-do society. It's like, why can't I figure this out? This is a question that I get as a grief counselor all the time. Maybe not every single day, but a lot of days. And that is, why is this so hard? Why can't I figure this out? And there are some things that are just really, really hard, and you don't want to try to do them on your own. So having a supportive community, great support team, and information, education, resources, it really can help. So, but thank you for saying that to Sally, because it's really true. I think a lot of times folks do feel like, I want to know that there will be somebody there who can honor my wishes. And so the peace of mind part of it is huge. But also in, providing assistance with talking to family members, the folks who are just like, oh, you know what, I feel like if we talk about this, it's gonna make it happen, kind of thing. So just know there's a lot there that can be worked through, talked through. It doesn't have to be a short conversation. As a grief support professional, I really am here for y'all. Feel free to give me a call and just say, Catherine, can I talk to you a few minutes about this? Absolutely. So, and I'm happy to read my email address and phone number to you if anybody wants to write it down. It's long, and I should put it on this presentation, and then it would be huge. And
I'll get it. Does she have your address?
It is. It's on the bottom of the handout. It's K. Henderson. So my first initial, my last name, and it's the regular spelling of Henderson, at, this is the long part, affinityvirginia.com. So if you can see that logo up there, no, it's affinityvirginia.com. And it's K. Henderson at affinityvirginia.com, and area code 804-460-6550. I used to do a radio show when I was in Attleboro, Massachusetts, and we would always do that as the tagline. I feel I'm having a little deja vu, y'all. Yeah, there was a question, someone in the back, sorry, I can't see.
You have a different number on here.
Did I put my personal cell on there? Oops.
It's 804-461-7720.
Oh, that's my personal cell. Sure. Call, text me. No, this was a fairly recent thing. The organization where I work decided they didn't want us to give out our personal cell. It's fine. I welcome a text. I especially welcome a text, honestly, because I can almost always get back to you pretty quickly. A phone call, it might take me a little bit longer, but, and I despise email, y'all, but please email me. Feel free, email away. Actually, email is great if you would like the live links, because then I'm just gonna send you the actual document with the hyperlinks in it, and you can just click and go straight to the website. But that's too funny that I had not revised that since I was here in September. Thank you for pointing that out to me.
Any further questions?
Yes, a couple up here. Wait, I think there were two.
Anybody have a question?
And, I can't.
Hands?
Oh, Joy.
I would just like you to repeat your personal self. I didn't get it.
Okay. You're not recording this, are you, Delonte?
It's recording.
It's area code 804
On YouTube.
461 7720. You are welcome. No, I'd love to hear from any of y'all, really and truly. It is, oh, I better give this disclaimer though. It is off after 5 p.m., so it's only on from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m.
I'm sorry.
Sure.
Thank you all for coming, but before you leave, I want to point this out. This is the VaCCRA newsletter, the front page of the VaCCRA newsletter from this past summer. And I want to share this with you. The studies by healthaffairs.org show that less than 46% of American seniors have prepared an advance directive. Then I want to share this. The Virginia's Advanced Healthcare Directive Registry offers a secure registry for citizens to store the Virginia Advanced Healthcare Directives, durable do not resuscitate orders, healthcare power of attorney, financial power of attorney, and other documents. This is a good resource for all of us. If you look carefully at your VaCCRA newsletter each time we get them, I think you'll find a lot of good information that we can all use. And now, Catherine, thank you so much. We appreciate you. And she's willing to stay behind if anybody wants to talk privately with her.
I can add that to my resource list for folks
Yeah, you
too.
have this.
Thank you all. See you on February 20th.